thought I needed the new iPhone. Turns out, I just need to stop shooting like an amateur. A few months ago, I went to Vietnam. I shot a ton of videos on my iPhone 16 Pro in Apple Log using the Blackmagic camera app. When I got home, I was excited to see the footage and immediately disappointed. A lot of the shots looked, well, like garbage. Or just like video and not cinematic at all. So I did what every filmmaker does when something doesn't look right. I blamed the camera and moved on. Then the new iPhone 17 Pro came out. I watched the launch videos, the sample clips. They looked really nice, but nothing really new, to be honest. And of course, Apple called it the
most cinematic camera we've ever made.
There is no such thing as a cinematic camera. Lighting, camera movement, color, intention, those are the things that make something look cinematic. People make those choices, not the cameras. So it got me thinking, maybe it wasn't the camera, maybe it was me. So instead of throwing more money at Apple, I gave my old Vietnam footage a second look. Now, since that trip, I had learned a few new tricks in Resolve and had a better understanding of color. So I regraded some clips and a few of them actually surprised me. The image held up much better than I remembered. But most of the clips still looked not great or just straight up bad. And I think I finally understood why. So here are 5 things to fix before you spend another $1,200 on a new iPhone. One of the biggest giveaways that something is shot on a phone is motion. In daylight, your shutter speed goes crazy high and everything looks sharp and jittery. Every movie you've ever seen has motion blur, so when you pause a frame, it's not perfectly sharp. And that's a good thing. That blur is what connects frames and makes movement feel natural. When you let the shutter go super high, everything is always sharp and movement just looks choppy. The fix is simple. Control your shutter with ND filters. Keep it at a 180-degree shutter angle, which just means double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 25 FPS like me, use a 50th of a second. In the Blackmagic camera app, just set your shutter manually. You can also change the shutter to angle and set it to 180 degrees and then lock it. Now use your ND filter to fine-tune the exposure. That's all you need for smooth film-like motion. When I was in Vietnam, I skipped the ND because I was just lazy. And that's why those shots, even when they looked clean and well composed, just felt off.
Not cinematic.
For a long time, I thought the iPhone was just one camera with 3 lenses. It turns out it's actually more like 3 completely different cameras. Each lens has its own sensor, aperture, and behavior. So switching cameras doesn't just change framing, it changes characteristics. The main 1x camera is your workhorse. It has the strongest sensor, the cleanest image. That's the one you can trust almost anywhere, day or night, as long as your exposure is right. It's basically your A-cam. The 0.5 ultrawide is a different story. It is great in bright daylight, but once light levels drop, it loses detail fast and it won't look great. And then there's the 5x telephoto. That's where the iPhone starts to look like a much bigger camera. You get real optical compression, real depth, but again, only if you have enough light. Once you treat them like different cameras with different strengths, your footage instantly looks more consistent and way more predictable. And one more thing, flares. No matter what camera you use on the iPhone, smartphone lenses struggle with direct light sources, especially at night. The reason is simple: tiny lenses, tight spacing. There's just no room for proper coatings. So, at night, try to avoid direct harsh light sources in your shot. Sometimes that's all it takes. By day, flares sometimes can even look nice. A lot of my shots were done in low light, and they looked terrible. Now, don't get me wrong, the iPhone can handle low light, but only if you respect its limits. If you want your night shots to actually look good, there are 2 things to follow. The first thing we already discussed. Use the main 1x camera in low light. It shoots the cleanest image in tough light. Second, be realistic about what low light means. Big sensors can cheat bad light. My full-frame Sony body basically has night vision. Low light for a full-frame camera is not the same as low light for a phone. As a rule of thumb, if I can see texture with my eyes, the iPhone can probably handle it. If I can't, it won't. And by the way, that iPhone 17 Pro low light promo footage, there's a lot of light on those sets and even more processing. And actually there's one more thing here. Most iPhone footage doesn't fall apart because of color, it's exposure. Auto exposure keeps trying to help. It brightens when the scene looks dark and darkens when something bright enters the frame. Earlier we locked exposure to stop those brightness shifts, but there's a second reason that matters. When you don't lock it, two things start changing constantly: your shutter speed and also your ISO. The shutter speed affects motion. The ISO affects your image quality. But what's the right ISO to shoot with? Most cameras have something called a native ISO. That's the point where the sensor performs best. It is the cleanest image, the widest dynamic range. But with the iPhone, Apple never tells us what the native ISO is. In Apple's own behind-the-scenes footage, you can actually see their crews shooting with the Blackmagic camera app at ISO 55. But I also found a video of Gerald Undone, and he tested the sensor and found the most dynamic range around 1200 ISO or higher. So who's right, Apple or Gerald? Turns out both. ISO 1200 actually gives you more dynamic range, so you can hold slightly more detail in highlights and shadows. I did a quick test with ISO 55 and ISO 800. On the left, some highlights are clipped, and on the right, there seems to be more information in the highlights. But ISO 55 gives you the cleanest, sharpest image, less noise and more detail. And that makes perfect sense. Apple's shooting in a controlled studio, no crazy highlights, and they care about the cleanest image and not the most amount of dynamic range. But out in a bright, contrasty daylight situation, the higher ISO can help preserve highlights. But in practice, it is a nightmare. Shooting at ISO 1200 in sunlight would need like 9 or even 12 stops of ND. I max out my filter most of the time already at ISO 55. Personally, I would rather keep a proper 180-degree shutter angle and just use a lower ISO, even if it means losing a bit of dynamic range. In bright daylight, you can use a higher ISO, even something like ISO 800 just offers more dynamic range, but only if you have a strong ND. But just something to be aware of, a higher ISO can also mean a ton more noise and a lot less detail. And one last thing to clear up, raising the ISO doesn't add light to the sensor, it just amplifies what's already there. And sometimes that means noise. So if you need more light, actually add more light. Cranking ISO in the dark will probably just give you more noise. And now finally, how to expose right. And I do this pretty simple. Just expose as bright as possible without clipping your highlights. Once they're gone, they're gone. You cannot rebuild highlights. I mostly used zebras. I set them to around 85 to 90. It's always safer to lift shadows later in post. The log footage on the iPhone actually holds up pretty well when you brighten. Most of the time when my iPhone footage looked bad, it wasn't the camera, it was me. Phone out, record, move on, mostly in a rush, and phones just don't forgive that. With a big sensor and a fast lens, it is pretty easy to make something look good. But with a phone, everything is in focus. Every mistake, every distraction. You actually have to design what you want the viewer to look at, with framing, color and timing. When you slow down, observe and make deliberate choices, the image feels a lot different. The less the camera helps you, the more you have to think and see like a filmmaker. So yeah, I thought I needed the new iPhone. Turns out I just needed an ND filter and some patience. Who knew? Way cheaper too. And just to be clear, the 17 Pro isn't gonna fix any of those things. It's still a tiny sensor. The lenses are roughly the same. The 5x is now an 8x, which is cool, but nothing life-changing. If you're on a 15 Pro or a 16 Pro, just keep it. Learn it, you can get incredible results once you know how to use it properly. But if you're still on the 14 Pro or older, that's where the real leap in video quality happened. The 15 Pro introduced Apple Lock and just massive sensor improvements. So that's the one upgrade I would actually recommend. But for everyone else, I would not upgrade. I would save the money and just learn how to use it properly.